This has easily got to be some of the best news that rideshare drivers could ever hear. What up, folks? Once again, it is indeed your guy Tim with another ride-sharing video. Straight off the presses, coming out of ABC News. This is an article. I want to read you the gist of it and let you hear how great this sounds. Uber and Lyft agree to pay $328 million for withholding money from drivers. They're paying a combined $328 million that they had been withholding from drivers. Now, I want to give you the gist of this story, but understand, when companies agree, quote unquote, agree, this is not a trial or some kind of case where then you had a jury decide the verdict. Uber and Lyft agreed to pay this money. So I can assure you there was more taken from drivers, and they agreed to quote unquote stop the bleeding. Kind of like a criminal taking a plea deal because they're about to lose the fucking case. Now, in this $328 million, because this is coming from both Uber and Lyft, we know Uber is the granddaddy of ride sharing. So Uber, out of the $328 million, 290 of it is coming from Uber alone. Lyft only has to pay $38 million. So this is why I often talk, when I'm talking about corruption from these fucking companies, I often bring up that Uber is the granddaddy of corruption. And Lyft sometimes does the same shit because they cannot compete with a company that's doing so much awful stuff. But I want you to hear the gist of this story and what's going on and how awesome this is. Now, I will tell you one thing about this. The prosecutor on this is very well known, disliked by a hell of a lot of people, talking about my folks on the right, because she's also going after President Trump. We're talking about Letitia James. This is happening in the city of New York, basically encompassing that entire state, all the rideshare drivers in the state. Remember, Letitia James is the same individual that's going after Trump for $250 million. But I want you to hear this story from an Uber and Lyft perspective. This is not about discussing President Trump, but I want you to hear what she's doing to Uber and Lyft. Here's a quote from Letitia James herself, and listen to what she accomplishes in this. For years, Uber and Lyft systemically cheated their drivers out of hundreds of millions of dollars in pay and benefits while they worked long hours in challenging conditions. Letitia James said in a statement, "These drivers overwhelmingly come from immigrant communities and rely on those jobs to provide for their families. This settlement will ensure they finally get what they have rightfully earned and are owed under the law." Now, I'm not going to get too deep into where the money was taken from the drivers, but I'll tell you this. Tolls and things like that are heavy in the New York City area. The pay for that stuff was supposed to be charged to the drivers. Uber was collecting money in tolls and things like that from the passengers, where the money, you're riding in a vehicle and the vehicle goes through a toll, your trip should cost more. They were making the drivers essentially pay that or pay it. Basically, the passengers were paying the tolls, and they were also making the driver pay the tolls, and they were keeping the money charged to the passengers. So they did what they essentially do to all of us in ride sharing. They found ways to give passengers an excuse to raise their rates, and they passed none of it on to the drivers. We are dealing with this in every market, probably in the world. Certainly in the United States, we all know, as a driver myself, personally been driving since 2014. When I started driving, passengers paid a hell of a lot less for trips than they do now, and drivers made a hell of a lot more than they do now. So Uber and Lyft have raised up the fares it costs to ride in an Uber or Lyft significantly, and the earnings that drivers make has decreased a lot. Obviously, Uber and Lyft are making a fortune. There's no other excuse in it. There's no other way to look at it. Letitia James has held them accountable and scored $328 million. going back to the drivers. But there's a whole lot more she accomplished than just getting that 328 mil, because the 328 mil is only for a few years. She's also accomplished something that is going to be essentially forever. So if you're driving in New York, there is no better fucking news than this for rideshare drivers in New York. This is the kind of stuff that we are hoping to get all over the damn country. Listen to this. In addition to paying a total of 320 mil in back pay to former drivers, Uber and Lyft agreed to an earnings floor, guaranteeing drivers across the state are paid a minimum rate. Drivers outside of New York City will receive a minimum of $26 per hour. Drivers operating in New York City already receive a minimum driver pay under regulations established by the Taxi and Limousine Commission. This goes back to what I've stated before. Strikes are bullshit. You need legislation. We need legislation in ride sharing to get treated properly. New York City, New York State, Letitia James has effectively given them legislation. So they have an earnings floor. No more drive 5 miles and get paid $3 type bullshit, where what we are dealing with in most markets. That's why a lot of drivers have a decline rate or an acceptance rate, that the percentage of trips they accept, less than 10%, because so many trips are unprofitable. In this situation where drivers make a minimum of $26 per hour, you can bet your ass those unprofitable trips are going to start disappearing. There's no way you can make $26 an hour if you're driving people all over the fucking city for $4 and $5 that a lot of us are dealing with. The only other market I've seen score something this significant is probably Seattle. Remember we covered in Minnesota where they had something similar to this coming down the pipe and the damn governor vetoed it? And then it went before the mayor of the city and he vetoed it as well, falling victim to Uber and Lyft claiming, well, if you pay the drivers a good rate, we're going to have to move out of city. Fuck that. Letitia James handled her business on this. As I stated before, I understand a lot of folks who support Trump don't want to hear any damn thing good about Letitia James because she's likely going to score a lot of money on Trump as well. He's already been found guilty in her $250 million case. So she's obviously going to get tens of millions of dollars out of the former president, but that's a whole different video. And continuing on just briefly, Uber and Lyft drivers. Now, this is in addition to the $26 minimum wage drivers are going to receive. This is in addition to the $328 million they got to pay in fucking back pay. Here's, as they say, but wait, there's more. Uber and Lyft drivers will now also receive guaranteed paid sick leave. What the fuck is that? Most rideshare drivers would ask. Guaranteed paid sick leave. Drivers will earn 1 hour of paid sick leave for every 30 hours they work, up to a maximum of 56 hours per week. 56 hours per week, but is that divided by 8? That's 7 whole days if you work an 8-hour day. Most rideshare drivers work more than 8 hours if they're doing it full time. You don't make shit in ridesharing if you're only working 8 hours a day. So most drivers do more than 8 hours a day. But based on an 8-hour work day, which is what they do in the W-2 world, that would be a whole paid week. Not 5 days, but 7 days. It's a start. I mean, obviously, we'd want more than a week of vacation, but considering most of the country, in regards to the gig economy, gets 0 paid days, 0 paid hours per year, getting 56 of them bitches is good. So this is a huge, fucking huge accomplishment for New York City and New York State. Unlike what they ended up doing in Minneapolis, where it's just covering the city, not even the fucking suburbs, Letitia James in New York, they got the whole state covered. So not only are you making decent money in the city of New York, where cost of living is sky high and things like that, they covered the whole state. Rochester, Syracuse, Buffalo, any of those cities you're in. Minimum $26 an hour. This forces people like Derek Shower How much you earn 30 some bucks and utilize hours. Now you gotta back that shit up. Now they really are making money. I like this because Seattle has proven that you can pay the drivers a decent earning and it's not going to destroy the rideshare business. Uber and Lyft has been singing this same bullshit tune across the nation anytime somebody tried to pass some type of fair, anytime someone tried to pass a fair legislation or a fair law to get legislation from drivers, they've been telling the city, well, if you give them a minimum wage, rates are going to go up so much, we're going to have to remove ride sharing from your city. And city after city after city has been falling for this, keeping drivers damn near going into bankruptcy. There's plenty of trips, no denying there are plenty of trips out there as a rideshare driver that if you take that trip, you will actually lose money. There shouldn't be a single damn trip coming down the pipe that if a driver does, they actually lose money. There's no excuse for the pay to be that low. Now, I told you on my last video, I did a ride share streak. Got the streak bonus. You do 3 trips, you get an extra 15 bucks or whatever. And I took a trip had a woman get in the car and we were yapping it up. She was talking and asking me, what is it like driving for Uber or Lyft? And I was letting her know the pay discrepancy. And I told her, I showed her on screen because I take screenshots of my trips. This trip you're on, you're only going a few miles. It pays me $4 and something. And she was shocked. She was like, this trip cost me $13.70. That's the shit we're talking about. Where the driver is getting $4 for a trip that the passenger's being charged $13 for. There is no legitimate excuse for that. We need more legislators to sit down with the likes of Uber and Lyft and ask them, why do you get so much of the trip? Could you explain in a way that makes sense how the individual who's using their car, their fuel, their time, putting their safety at risk, gets such a small slice of the pie and you're getting all this money? And as I stated, $13 you're getting $4. That's how most trips are, folks. That's not some type of outlier. If you're driving for Uber or Lyft on a regular basis, most of your trips are that way. Unless you're in one of these areas that has passed legislation that is trying to treat drivers fairly, such as Seattle and now New York. There's very few cities like this, though. Uber and Lyft is in every market. Very few cities are doing that. So the cities that are not doing it, most of the trips are like that, where the ride-sharing company is getting well over half of most fares. Some cases, 75, 80% of the fare is going to the company. There's no legitimate excuse for that. So we definitely need more of this. But I just wanted to run it by you because Letitia James has scored really fucking big. And this would also counter those who would say, well, why the hell, like even in the Trump case, why are you wasting time on this guy when there's crime in your city and there's all kinds of other shit? Why can't you do something that is productive? This right here is fucking productive. A lot of drivers in the gig economy using their own vehicles, particularly immigrants that do not have a lot of experience with finances, are being driven into bankruptcy by these companies that are telling folks, if you do ride sharing as a side hustle, you'll be flexible, you'll make good money, when in reality, you're not making shit. Holding these companies accountable, this is great. So, like I said, in addition to her likely scoring a couple $100 million from Trump, she's also gained $328 million from Uber and Lyft and has now made ride sharing a profitable endeavor in her entire state. I don't know what they're paying her, but the fact that I can name 2 cases where she's brought in $500 million, likely to bring in over $500 million. She's worth whatever the hell they paying her, whether you like her or not. If you had her job and you could bring the state over $500 million, I'm sure you would be guaranteed a bit of job security. Likely she's probably doing other shit, but shout out to Letitia James for looking out for us rideshare drivers. It couldn't have happened to a worse company like Uber and Lyft. $290 million of this money is coming from Uber alone. And if I'm correct, according to the article, I think this goes from like 2015 to 2019 or something like that. So that big swath of money It's only for a few years. They were robbing people just that badly. For you folks who watch other rideshare content creators, I think Sergio and the rideshare guys often talk about, if you're just stealing a nickel or a dime here and you got millions of trips being performed, it adds up. This is a perfect example of that. Where you're talking $328 million in one area, just at one state rather, just New York. I understand it's one of the most populous states in the country, but if they're getting that kind of money from drivers in one state, multiply that by 50 of them. Imagine how much money they're making if they're ripping off drivers that bad just in one fucking state. In just a few years, $328 million that they're agreeing to. They obviously owe more. They don't want this to proceed further and go to a jury trial. They obviously owe more. They're agreeing to pay $328 million. Can you just fucking imagine? Anyhow, I just wanted to run this by you because that was a shocker to see those numbers and to see those accomplishments coming from Letitia James, and I wanted to bring it to you folks. Do appreciate you guys tuning in. Feel free to subscribe to the channel. You know what we do here. So as always, it is your guy, Tim. I'll see you in the next video.